All right. Welcome everybody to Engaging Students with Leo. Dan, glad to be here. My name is Austin Rutledge. I am with DaVinci Education. I am the manager of client education. And, I have a lot of fun doing my job. I get to work with people all over the country who use Leo to teach students about health sciences. Dan, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Austin. And thanks everyone for joining us today or for watching the recording. Thanks for joining us now in tape delay world. My name is Dan Thompson. My role is I'm the Associate Director of Business Development here at DaVinci Education. As Austin said, as with a similar background, I've spent many years working in higher education and healthcare education, working with folks to do specifically what we're going to speak on today, helping to engage students. And so it's a pleasure to be with you. And it's Austin, you'll kind of take us away into our first little engaging activity here.
Yeah, so I'm going to, let's see, advance the slide here. And we had a question up in Leo, those of you who are joining us in Leo, to kind of let us know where you're joining from. And so I wanted to share those results so you guys can see, who all is watching and where they're watching from, at least those that are watching live with us, as Dan said. So we got people from all over, it looks like, as far west as Idaho and as far east as Connecticut. So exciting to have all of you with us today. If you're watching and you still have a chance to go ahead and click and tell us where you're from, those of you, obviously, this is very focused on the continental or, well, the United States. If you're watching from overseas, feel free to just kind of, drop your marker out there as close as you can to the direction you would go, I guess. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with today's content. So Dan, let's talk about the objectives for today.
Yeah, so the objectives say we try to keep them as straightforward as possible. And we wanted to really focus on some key elements in how we engage our students. So formative assessment, with formative assessment typically comes feedback. And so we'll speak to those pretty much in unison. We'll also talk about opportunities for providing reflection in Leo as well. Of course, a big part of engaging students is how to communicate with others, and specifically in this case, through Leo. And then, important to any educational program is tracking student progress. So we'll close out with that today as just a way to make sure that we're always focusing on those student outcomes and making sure we're advancing those, and not just, and I know Austin, we've talked about this for years together, not just engaging students for the sake of saying that you've done it, but in a real rich way that is improving outcomes and preparing them really for what's next in their career, whether that's moving into their actual career, or if it's next in their educational career and for the next courses for which you're preparing them. So if we can flip ahead here, Austin. And so Austin shared this with us. And really, I feel like there isn't an industry that this wouldn't resonate with. I know that we at DaVinci Education felt this. I'm sure all of the schools that we support have dealt with something very similar. And we know, Fitz talked yesterday, if you were able to join yesterday, as he spoke about what we've done in the past 18 months or so, and where Leo is continuing to go, really address that, how you all live this, and how we've supported that, and how we're continuing to go. And of course, that just also kind of made us laugh, since it was such a real world example. So as I mentioned in the first objective, we're going to talk about formative assessment, how to engage students in formative assessment. And first of all, what is formative assessment? Well, it's that assessment for learning on the go, that as you go throughout your lesson or your course, that you're allowing students to prove or show what information that they know, and practice what information, or the information that they've learned, in a way to make sure that they can apply it and are ready for the next step, whether that's your summative exam or the future lessons. We have here, when should you use it? And I always tell folks that when you're thinking about trying to put formative assessment into your curriculum or into a lesson, to use it with a purpose. So when you can identify key content that you want to make sure that students are have learned and are able to apply, that's a great time to use formative assessment. And also, you want to make sure that it's important content. We don't want to, we don't want our formative assessment to be a trivia contest with students. It might help them on Jeopardy. I wish I got a little bit of that myself, as my wife beats me in Jeopardy most evenings when we watch it. But for the sake of their career and what they're preparing for, you do want it to be relevant information, specific. Because and the reason, not only is it, you do want to make best use of their time, but it's also a communication tool. So we often think of formative assessment as an opportunity to engage our students with course content and in a way where they can show us what they know. And I know as educators, we want to gain that really useful information, so we know if we need to remediate students, that what topics we need to help them with, whether individual or whole course level. However, it's also an opportunity for us as educators to communicate with students. So I always used to tell my students when I would do, whether it was a quiz, a discussion, some of the activities that we're going to speak on in the next few slides, that if I add it to an assessment, if it's part of an activity that we're doing, I'm doing that with a purpose. And so I would always get out in front of them and tell them that, so they would value that in their learning, and also let them know that I was really trying to focus in on the key information that I wanted them to really be able to learn and recall. So there's two different types of formative assessment, or just assessment in general. There's the traditional, authentic that we see much today. Traditional is what we've probably all done ourselves as students, taking tests, taking quizzes, multiple choice, whether it's fill in the bubbles or circling them. I know I've graded more than a few of those by hand, that I hope to never have to do those again. And then there's authentic assessment, where you're actually putting students in a more real world situation. Fortunately, in healthcare professional situations, we are putting students, the curriculum's already set up in a way to put students in that situation through their clinical years. But there's also opportunities for that in the preclinical years as well, throughout the didactic courses, to allow students the opportunity to practice their skills, or to practice applying some of that, the biomedical science information in a way that you can give them real world feedback on their performance, in a way, again, that can help them to adjust and reflect and move forward and learn. And finally, I always tell folks when working through or creating a formative assessment, to identify your why and really your goal. I know I just mentioned this shortly ago, that you don't want to just engage students to engage them. You certainly don't want to use ed tech just to use it, although Austin and I probably have been guilty of that at times in our career, since we're so excited about tech sometimes. But you really want to be able to have a goal for each lesson, and not just the learning objectives, but as an educator, how you want to advance the students' learning in a specific way. And so when I would think about those goals that I would have and how I wanted to move students throughout each lesson, that would help me to identify if I wanted to use formative assessment and how I wanted to use it, whether it was something where more traditional, where I had a grade tied to it, or if it was something more authentic, whether it was role playing in the classroom, or students providing peer review after a group activity or discussion. So that those are just, if you're able to kind of step back and focus on what that why is, all of the other things really tend to fall in place quite naturally. Where can we go? We need to do the Carol Burnett thing, Austin, where like if I tug on my ear, you can advance the slide. And so whenever I think about formative assessment as well, and how to engage students, I often think about the fact that we need to be able to find the right instructional alignment. And that's, when you set your goal up, as I mentioned on the last slide, you have that certain learning goal that you want to work toward, but you want to have all this information, or the content, and just lesson information in alignment. So the reason I have the picture there, and I also have this prop too, and yes, this is on my desk. Oh, the Zoom background's messing with it. I might have put it in front of my body. I always have a baseball with me. And I always think about like how to throw a curveball. So if you were going to create a lesson for students on how to throw a curveball, and let's say your learning objective was at the end of this session, students would be able to identify what a curveball is. Well, you could show them a YouTube video of someone throwing a curveball. You could even give them, a written explanation. You could lecture about it. And then when it was time to do an assessment, if they just had to identify what a curveball is, you could do a multiple choice question. Maybe ask them for a short answer to describe it. Just some, it really would be something that simple because you're teaching it at a more basic level, just identify. Now, if you have students that are advanced and you want them to, they're at that higher level, and you want your learning objective is how to throw a curveball, well, that's going to change things a bit. So your learning objective would be students will be able to throw a curveball, and in that instance, students would be expected to. So when you did your lesson, you would actually give them a curveball and show them how to throw said curveball and allow them. And the formative assessment would be allowing them an opportunity to practice how to throw it. And then you'd give them feedback. You'd have that authentic feedback to give back to them after that authentic assessment. And then finally on test day, you would have them throw a curveball. So that's always what I go back to. I know I tend to stick with sports examples, but it does allow, it's a guide for me that I use to make sure that you're always aligned from session objective, learning objective, all the way through what you're teaching, how you're teaching it, how you're implementing and giving feedback on your formative assessment, and then finally what that summative assessment is. And so if you have all of those things in alignment, again, creating that goal, as I mentioned, what your learning goal is, and having the alignment throughout, you'll really see that your lesson will go that much more smoothly, and it'll have that much more of an impact on student performance. So with it and Leo specifically, there's a number of ways that we can go through how to provide feedback in student assessment and really informative assessment. One is through themes. And so you're going to see these next two slides, and they should be familiar if you were here yesterday, because I stole them directly from Fitz. And first and foremost is themes. As Fitz mentioned, evaluation questions can be tagged to a theme. So evaluations in Leo, which we have a little picture of those in a couple slides coming up, students will be able to, you'll be able to evaluate students and tag each evaluation item to a theme. And because of that, each rubric, and within there, you can have a rubric item that will allow students to evaluate them in a more rich way and give them more tangible feedback based on a numeric score with an actual description, and not just a pass fail, for example. So in this instance, we have it set, we're talking about EPAs and how to give students feedback on themes, and it's built-in authentic assessment and feedback within Leo. But one of the great things is that this doesn't just have to be EPAs. Themes can be what you want to assess and what you want to track over time. So if you have, for example, in a clinical skills course, like in a didactic preclinical setting, in that lab setting, for example, you can have themes tied to students, just basic things that students should be able to do in a clinical setting. So taking a history, taking a physical, and that way students are able to get that feedback in a rubric setting, right away, and be scored in that attached to our themes. But then also longitudinally over time, students can have rich feedback to where they're engaged in a learning setting, but also engaged in the feedback and the follow-up there. Let's see if we try the ear thing again. Thank you, Austin. Also, because the themes are now available or will be available, I think it's June 19th in your production system, that students will now have access to see their themes reports based off of these items. So if there is a rubric item where you have evaluated students whether in a preclinical or a clinical setting, they will be able to have this report. And again, you're engaging them in the authentic learning and getting them the feedback in a really timely fashion, which is a note I have on a slide. I'm kind of tipping my hand a little bit there. But this does display here in themes, as you can see, how students were evaluated. And therefore, again, it's quick, it's easy feedback. And we'll even talk, I know Austin will, a little bit about how you can combine comments is a really great engagement way with students as well. So we have the last two items here in formative assessment, Leo. One is on-demand evals. If you have yet to use on-demand evals, as Fitz was saying yesterday, I'd highly recommend it. I know as everyone on our team all had creative ways in which we would use them or help others use them in their classrooms. I'm actually going to steal one from Austin, even though he's live with us. I'm going to share. After we were chatting about how to use on-demand evaluations, and you can see on your screen right now the whole list of ways in which folks can trigger on-demand evals and then the different types of evals that you can do. And one really terrific sense, I just referenced, a clinical skills lab setting where students are doing OSCEs. And there's a lot of moving parts in an OSCE. I've spent many years helping to set those up and run the assessment side. And I can tell you that there's a lot of error points where you can have an issue. We've seen anything from folks, grading the wrong student because they've the scheduling was incorrect, or if you have a clinician that's unable to make it, or no call, no show, something to that degree, and have a lot of moving parts. It truly can be a pain. And since your schedules are so tightly packed, it's going to be tough to try and have students come back at a different time. With on-demand evals in Leo, if you're going to do an OSCEs, for example, your faculty, your preceptors can be in the room, in the patient room, waiting for the next student doctor to have their encounter with a patient. And they truly can pull up the student when they walk into the room just by student name, trigger an on-demand eval real time. And there's even the students, the pictures will be in Leo too if you upload your student composite photos, so that they can make sure they're scoring the appropriate student and provide that feedback right there. And now with auto-approved evals, those evals will be available to students after the fact if that's an option that you choose. And they'll be able to get that feedback immediately as well. So that it's a really great way to take what can be sometimes a cumbersome process and streamline it to be able to get that feedback to students. And also, of course, that information can be pushed to a gradebook as well, if that's something that you're using for scores. Okay, and then finally in Leo for formative assessment that we'll be highlighting today are TBLs, team-based learning. If you're new to team-based learning, here's the quick 60-second overview. With team-based learning, the object is to engage students actively in the classroom with course content. In order to do that, you should have expectations that students will consume some sort of content before they come to class, a video, reading, however, or maybe just something based off a previous class, even if you don't want to overdo it on the homework outside of class. When students come to class, they'll take what you see on the screen right now, an individual readiness assurance test, where they will take a short quiz, typically 5 to 10 questions. I usually used to stick with 5. And just to make sure that they're ready for class that day. These tend to be more difficult questions that I've seen that you'll want to use and not just basic comprehension, because you want to make sure they're ready to apply that knowledge that day. And as you can see on the screen, students, this is the GRAT version right now, which is the group readiness. In the individual readiness, they'll take the quiz. They won't know the answers quite yet. They will then, you group students, which you can do in Leo as well, of course. And you'll have students take that same assessment, the GRAT, the Group Readiness Assurance Test, and using only their brains in communication, no internet or books, or if we still have books, but no internet or any PowerPoint slides. And they will use groupthink to answer those questions. If they select them incorrectly, you can see in Leo, you have the frowning face indicating they didn't get it correct. However, students will continue to answer until they get the correct answer. Of course, if you do have it set up for points, they will incrementally lose points for each incorrect answer. At the end, the great thing about the engagement is that they're engaging with each other, but for the sake of immediate feedback, they'll be able to know the answer from each question as they move on. So even as an individual, if they struggled on those questions after the group experience, they will at least know the correct answer as they move into the session of the day where you're actually having them to apply that knowledge further, again, in that team-based experience. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that a little bit tomorrow in our panel assessments from some of our terrific, assessment panel from some of our terrific panelists then. So if we can flip through, and we're just I'm gonna close my part and then pass the torch to Austin on feedback. And so and when you engage students through formative assessment, you're really not completing the learning experience until you provide feedback for that content. We can jump to the next slide here, Austin. Thanks, sir. And so without feedback, formative assessment really is just kind of an exercise. Think of like the worksheet you did back in elementary school and turned in and maybe never got back from your teacher. That's really what formative assessment is without feedback. So you want to focus on either completing that specific learning exercise or advancing the learning experience for the next. And really, it's a combination of both. Putting a bow on that assessment, giving it feedback, but then preparing students for what's coming next. And that really is what makes your formative assessments count, because you're focused on what's coming next. I always like to look back after every semester and work with faculty to look back and evaluate the effectiveness of your formative assessment. So as you look at the summative assessments that you're preparing students for, whether in a didactic, more traditional sense of a written exam or in a clinical experience, I would, to the best of your ability, and especially if you're tagging these items with themes, look back to see how those formative assessments are preparing students appropriately. We want to have that engagement, but we also want to make sure that engagement is not just something that we think is valuable as faculty, but something that is truly advancing student preparedness for and achieving those outcomes. I think this is one more slide, and as we do this next slide, you may or may not, if you don't click away, but if you just scroll down below the YouTube video, you'll see another poll everywhere item come up. If you could give some feedback there, we would greatly appreciate that. So with making your feedback matter, I always have 4 items that you want to make sure that you do in giving that feedback. 1, make it content-based. Even if you're doing a traditional assessment, telling students that they got an 85% and a B is useful information, because most students, especially in healthcare education, are competitive and want to do well and care about their careers. However, it doesn't truly give them useful information to learn from their assessments. So make it content-based, especially in those traditional ones. Even if it's some sort of explanation for each answer, that's something that you want to provide either in conversationally or in a written sense, comments in a grade book or in the academic portrait. Make it timely. We just spoke about the auto approve in evaluations and the on-demand evaluations. And we talked about TBL and getting that immediate feedback. You want as much as you can, especially in the quick pace environment of medical education, to get that feedback to students in a timely way so that it can actually be top of mind and useful to them. We all know students are going through multiple courses at a time and have a whole lot of content that they're working through at any given time. So even if you wait so much as a week, it can be something that delay can cause a bit of a gap in student learning where that feedback might not even be worthwhile to them anymore. Make it meaningful. I mentioned before that part of that is content-based, and that's also quality of it. Make sure that you're describing the what the action is that they could improve, and then how to improve it. And then finally, actionable, especially in a clinical sense. Give students feedback in a way that they can truly improve their performance, and again, not just grade-based, but what they can do to how they can remediate, and not just what they need to fix, but also when they do something and it's spot on, give them that information as well, so that action can be to continue to repeat that item. And so and then finally, I'm not going to go too much into these items here, because Austin will as well, and he says them much more eloquently than I do. But some basic ways in which you can give feedback in Leo, and then we're excited on the next slide to see what you all have shared with us, is the gradebook. I mean, we're all used to a gradebook, even from kindergarten all the way to now. And so, but one important item is not to forget the comments. And again, Austin will hit on that. The academic portrait and evaluations, I often see hand in hand, whether it's in the academic portrait, you can leave notes for students as nice reminders, especially if you have something actionable items you want to give them for improvement. And again, your evals will be available there, especially as you tag those eval items and those rubric items to themes. You'll be able to see student performance in a really great longitudinal way throughout your curriculum. And that's, of course, valuable to the individual students. And right there in their portrait, you can see they can find the evaluations of them by others. I think at this time, we're gonna, if we do have some feedback in there, it's tremendous. Thank you everyone for your feedback. This is really great that there's a really, just various ways that folks are able to provide feedback to students. And we love to see all of these. And at this time, especially because I see some self-reflection on there, I'm gonna pass this over to Austin as he kind of takes it away from there. Thanks, Austin.
All right, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I really like the how varied the information here is. Seeing a lot of people, it looks like, are providing feedback on exams and quizzes. I think that's super important. One thing I really like about Leo is that you can actually make that, you have so much control over how that feedback is available when students are finishing up a quiz or an exam that they might take in Leo. And so they can get that immediately. You can have it delayed. Oh, gradebook just went up. Got people still answering. That's great. And then evaluations. All right, evaluations is back up there at the top now. I think that is super important that you guys are thinking about ways that you can provide feedback for students at your school. We know how important that is. And so I'm actually going to, if you notice down in the poll everywhere, that's kind of the tool that we're using for getting these answers and kind of embedding this content for you. I'm actually going to throw up the Q&A again. So if you see that in there, feel free to drop any questions that may have come up already as you're listening to Dan, or any questions that you have as we move forward and kind of wrap up our presentation for today. So I am going to be talking about reflecting on experiences. That's how we learn. Those of you who have attended any of our webinars or been around DaVinci education and using Leo for long, if you've seen me talk really on any type of thing that, pedagogy of any sort, you're probably going to hear me talk about reflecting. And I think it's so critical. You've probably seen me use this quote multiple times. I think it is so important that we recognize that we don't just learn from regurgitating information. We don't learn from memorization. We learn from reflecting on those experiences that we've had. Charles Dewey was an incredible early 20th century educator, and I think way ahead of his time when it came to emphasizing the importance on things like reflection in our pedagogy. So why is reflecting so important? Well, first of all, it speaks a lot to metacognition. And so, this idea of understanding our own thought processes and how we learn. And so you can see on the slide here, this guy's thinking about how he thinks. And, there's definitely some meta processes at play here. And so kind of stepping outside of ourselves to examine how did we learn something and how do we best learn things, which kind of leads to that second reason for reflecting. And that is, reflecting on your learning experience so that you can either alter your thinking about a specific topic, or you can confirm your thinking about a specific topic. And this really goes back to what Dan was saying with formative assessment. I think formative assessment and reflection really do go hand in hand. If you're doing formative assessment, it really isn't as good if they're not reflecting on it. And obviously, if you aren't engaging in formative assessment, they don't really have much to reflect on. So I think those are really important in terms of engaging students and getting them active in the learning process. And then finally, I think when we are reflecting on activities, it's important that we are, thinking about how to, determine what did we do, in which way did I study, or which tools did I use that really led to success, or which didn't. Maybe during the first exam in a course, I studied a certain way, I used certain tools, and then in the second exam, maybe I tried something different. And so you can see, well, did it lead to better understanding, more more learning taking place, or did maybe that didn't work as well? And so that's important for students to think about those things metacognitively, reflect on them, and obviously choose the options that are going to lead to success. So kind of wrapping up that kind of whole process of reflection is really thinking about what happened, and because of that, what am I going to do next? And this whole kind of cyclical process of reflecting on the content, and then thinking about how you learned it, and how you're going to change or do things differently in the future. So let's talk about Leo. I love Leo and all the different tools that it has that allows students and faculty really to reflect on what's going on in the classroom. Whether it is written assignments and quizzes, and I mentioned earlier with quizzes, I think I've seen a lot of people, quizzes are something a lot of people use in Leo. One of the things I don't see, and I'm guilty of this as well, I learned how to set up the quiz, but I kind of ignored all those optional things. And feedback is one of those optional components of quizzes in Leo. But I think it's so powerful if we can provide some of the rationale and the explanations for questions and answers, so that students can get that feedback after the quiz is over and use that as a learning experience. And then written assignments as well in Leo have opportunities and places for you to allow comments. And then if you were around yesterday, you noticed that Fitz kind of explained some of the new LTI capabilities that Leo has. So some of those written assignments using tools like Turnitin, you can even expand that even more. Other ways that Leo can provide opportunities for reflection, discussions here. We have some discussion questions up for you guys in today's event. So feel free to go back and reflect on some of the tools. These questions are a lot about ed tech tools, but feel free to let us know what ed tech tools you guys are using, and think about how you guys can use discussions as a way for students to reflect and think about the learning content. Now, the next two that you see on the screen, peer evaluations and self-evaluations. That goes back, and a lot of you said that you used evaluations, but I'm curious to know how many of you are using just evaluations of a student versus allowing students to evaluate each other and or themselves. I think one of the more powerful ways to use evaluations, Dan mentioned using them for OSCEs. I think a really powerful way is to not only have faculty evaluate students using evals in Leo, but have the students evaluate themselves using the same rubric tools. And what can be great about that is the students can immediately kind of think about how they scored themselves. But then when they get those results, and maybe they're auto approved, or maybe they just go through the approval workflow in Leo. But when they see those results from the faculty member, they have that, well, okay, this is what I thought, and this was reality. So what am I missing? Where do I need to focus my efforts? And then I'm going to speak to this concept of embedded activities in a little bit. There are so many tools out there. In fact, if you look in today's materials, you'll notice a blog article that we have linked to. I don't know if, Dan, if it was 23 or however many different materials there were
23.
there.
Mm-hmm.
23, okay. There's more than that. I had to stop somewhere when I was preparing that. I would have ended up with hundreds, but because there literally are hundreds. But so many great third-party ed tech tools that allow you to just embed the content in whatever platform you're using. So like with Leo, you can embed that content right into Leo. And then one of my favorites that you guys are using today, Poll Everywhere. Again, Q&A. You can go scroll down. If you have questions that are coming up, feel free to drop those in. I think you can actually upvote, like up or down vote those as well. So hit those, the thumb up or the thumb down, and you can somebody's asked a question that you really want to hear an answer to. So we literally just took the embed code from Poll Everywhere and dropped that right into Leo for today's event, and boom, it shows up. You can use that with your students. And then obviously the academic portrait. Hopefully you got to see the presentation yesterday, Leo Looks Ahead. That recording is in the event. Wait till we're done here, because if you leave, you'll be missing out on this event. But check that out at some point if you didn't make it to that. Fitz talked a lot about what's going on with the academic portrait and how that is really going to transform the ability for students to see, and for students and mentors and administrators to really kind of get a much clearer picture about what the students are learning, where they are in the learning process, and how they're progressing, as Dan was talking about earlier, on things like EPAs and competencies. So to kind of wrap up this section on reflection, reflection is super important, but oftentimes we think about it in terms of students, and that's really a great place to start. But I would encourage you to also think about how faculty are reflecting. I remember, when I go back, it's been longer than I want to admit now, to my pre-service education when I was in my undergraduate career. And I remember the instructors there that at our College of Education talking about how important it is to be a reflective teacher and to have this reflective process. And we had so many assignments where it was mandated that we complete all these different things to reflect on how we taught a sample lesson, or when we were student teachers, we had to fill out certain forms that really kind of forced us into that reflective mindset. And I will admit, I didn't see the value of it then, but looking back, even just a few years down the road, I could see how important that was, that, when you reflect on what you did with students in the classroom and how students learn, and how maybe you want to, teach them to, or, how you want to alter what you're doing to focus on what they could do better, what you could do better as an educator. So communication is kind of the next topic I want to touch on today, because I think this is also really critical. If students aren't prepared for what's going to happen in the classroom, if they're unsure of what's going on, or maybe they don't know what to do next when they leave the classroom, that can kind of get in the way. Miscommunication can really get in the way of some of the things that we've talked about when it comes to formative assessment or reflective exercises, things like that. And so it's really important that we are communicating with students as much as possible. I remember when I've worked with teachers, one of the things that we would talk about when I was actually working with teachers in the K-12 setting, but one of the things we really focused on when using online tools especially, was that there's no way that you can over communicate with students. Is that you can't tell them enough what's coming up, what's required, what they need to do next, what they should be looking back over in preparation for the next quiz or exam, or things like that. And so Leo has lots of great tools for communication as well. One of those are simple event announcements. I know I actually utilized this quite a bit when I was working at a medical school with faculty and using Leo. And I really focused on one of the first things that I would work with faculty when I was in a one-on-one setting was how to send event announcements in Leo. I thought this was so important that, that faculty were aware of how they can communicate to students, what to expect when they arrive to class, and then what they need to do when they leave class. And so, as you can see here, those announcements are just going to show up right in the event. Students can click on announcements. They can also get them via email. So if you click on, when you create an announcement, if you check the email box, they're going to get that right in their inbox right away. You can also schedule announcements, and you can even determine a priority level. And one of the things I really like is when you choose that highest priority level, students are going to get a big red box as soon as they log into Leo. And so I know, students will often use the phrase, "Oh gosh, I didn't see that in my email," or I get so many emails, I just missed that one. Or I didn't see the notification, in the little bell icon. And so I missed that, or the email. I think there's the emails, the bell, and those other icons in the top right in Leo. And sometimes students, it's fair to admit, they might get a lot of messages or a lot of activity going on. So they might miss some things in there. But if you choose that highest priority, it's really hard for students to say, I didn't get that message, when there's this like huge red box right on their screen. And so they can see that message when they log in, and obviously, they click go to your inbox so they can read the full message and see what's going on. So I would also encourage you to think too about when you communicate with students, think about using rich content as well. And so when I say rich content, what I'm talking about is something besides just text. Now, obviously, there's formatting of text, so you can change the bold and using different colors to draw attention to things. Bulleted lists are sometimes super helpful when you're explaining what is coming up or what students need to do next. But with announcements or messages in Leo, you can actually embed content there as well. And so you can see here, we just sent, Virginia Apgar has just sent a message to the pediatrics clerkship. And so she has embedded this video about how to calculate the Apgar score. I guess you guys can probably guess who that was named after. What is great about this, now I do note, the embedded content doesn't get sent via email. Email applications just don't allow that for a lot of security reasons. So like embedding content and getting it into your email, most Outlook and Gmail and those things like that aren't going to allow that content to pass through. So Leo doesn't send that out, but they do see it. So when they get that big red box when they log into Leo and they click go to your inbox, they will see all of that embedded content there. So this might be, as you can see here, something from YouTube, but it might also be just, if you're using certain lecture capture tools and you can create, video announcements. Sometimes you can send those video announcements out through those messages in Leo. Students have to see the option they have to click away to choose to ignore it. And so it's really a great tool for communicating with students. Now, another, I think, and Dan mentioned, I was going to bring this up, with the gradebook, there is also a comment section with every single score in a student's gradebook in Leo. Faculty, course directors, depending on who has access to that course gradebook, if it's an assignment from an event, then faculty in that event can enter those comments there before it gets sent to the gradebook. Depending on how your settings are set up at your school and who has access to the events in the gradebook, but those, regardless of who has the access, any comments that are entered there are going to show up with that student's score. They'll get a little icon when they access the gradebook on their own, and they can check out what those comments are. And for those of you that tuned in yesterday, Fitz pointed out that we are really kind of changing what we see in the academic portrait, giving you a much more thorough picture of student performance. And so as you can see now, you can select a course. If we're looking at Lucy Stone's academic portrait, you can select a course and you can see her score. You can see the score of her peers. And then you can even break down the different categories of the gradebook and see student performance. And so again, seeing Lucy's score, the average score, as well as the difference. And then for any assignment, like I said, like I showed you earlier, where those comments can be entered, for any assignment, those comments are accessible just one click away by clicking on that comment icon. So comments, while I know from my own experience, sometimes, when you're scoring a lot of different students, it can be, you think, oh gosh, I don't want to type in a comment for everyone. I would really encourage you to think about typing in comments for students, that you really need to communicate with, whether they, there's something that they really missed or something that they did really great that you want to see them continue to do. Think about how you can use those comments to engage with students. Okay, coming soon, I do want to kind of add a primer here for Thursday. Thursday, we're going to be talking about tracking student progress. That's something that I did want to hit on today too, because I think that is also part of engaging with students, giving them the tools to kind of, see how they're doing. And one of the things that I think helps with that is using rubrics. And so we'll talk some more about this on Thursday, like I said, but with regards to rubrics, this is going to allow you to track student progress over time. And if you saw all of the great tools Dan was talking about, whether it is EPAs or competencies or whatever it is you're wanting to track students on, rubrics are a great tool to kind of see that growth over time. And because it's a tool that you can easily provide to students ahead of time as well, they can see, you know, where they are and where they want to get to, and think about, and it kind of goes back to reflection, right? Think about how they want to get there. So now, a few other things that I just wanted to bring up that I think are really important when it comes to engaging with students, providing opportunities for them to engage with you. And again, goes back to using rich content. And so what I have here, this is a screenshot of the rich context editor. And this is one of the things I really love, this button here. If you see my mouse, I'm kind of mousing over this full screen icon. What that really helps when you go in to edit, you know, add content in the rich content editor, you can click that button and you get a full screen. So you can really see, you know, just, you can see it more like what a student would see. And so you can, you know, add important messages at the top if you need to. This is an embedded content from Quizlet. Quizlet is another one of my favorite tools that I love. One of the really neat things about Quizlet, by the way, is you can actually search for content in there. So this was one, I don't think you can tell from this screen, but I just searched for myocardial infarction, and I found this set of terms that was all about cardiomyopathies and things like that. And so I embedded that content. I actually just borrowed it, kind of made it my own. If I wanted to go in and alter editing the questions or anything, I could do that. And then it embeds right in Leo. And so you just use this button right here where my mouse is here. That's where you can embed media. And you just literally you copy and paste embed code and you drop it right in. And so I'm going to be talking, for those of you that join us this afternoon, all of our client partners, when you join us for the Leo Lab with me and Mel this afternoon, we're going to be talking about how to embed certain things and some certain tricks for embed codes and things like that. It's really going to be a fun session. It'll be interactive. We'll be doing that in Zoom. So you guys can hop into the event later today and just click on the Zoom in the event menu and you'll be right there. All right. So also, I couldn't not mention LTI. Fitz talked a lot about LTI yesterday and all of the great tools that you'll be able to bring into Leo. All of the tools that have LTI functionality, Leo can work with. And so whether it, you know, you see a lot of lecture capture tools here, like I mentioned, video conferencing tools like Zoom. We're using the LTI tool for Zoom this week for you guys to join our Leo Labs. If you notice, you're just clicking on Zoom in the event menu and the link and the join button are right there for you. And so that's a great tool for, you know, streamlining all of those different processes instead of having to keep track of all those different Zoom links and things like that. But again, these third-party tools, they all have different functionalities that are helpful and useful. And so if you're, you know, once we roll out all of that LTI functionality into Leo later this month, if you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to contact us. We want to help you utilize those tools in Leo. As I mentioned, Zoom, this was one of those examples. You know, you just go straight to Zoom, and we're actually even giving you some new tools to help manage all of those different LTI tools in your course and in your events to kind of streamline some of that management process. So I am going to open up this word cloud. And so you guys should see this down below. Take some time to think about how you want to, or what LTI tools you guys are using at your institution. Dan, I don't know if are there any tools that like you remember using when you were working with MedEd, or even, you know, in your past experience as an educator, what are some of the ways that you really like to use LTI tools?
It's a great question. And also great use of wait time, Austin, where you can start a conversation with your co-presenter. And since wait time can be such a difficult thing when you do throw questions out there, you know, it's funny, the word cloud or the little image that you stole from Fitz is really helpful and kind of jogging my memory. And a lot of the presentation or student engagement tools, like a Turning Point I've used over the years. We're seeing, Poll Everywhere and Panopto. I feel like people are, reading the different things I've done in my career. I'm a big fan of Nearpod as a way of an instructional tool, and it also looks really great in Leo as well. I know that you and I, Austin, have actually co-presented with Nearpod in Leo before, and it's a really great way to engage students, and then also all while I think you've hit this nail on the head real well, Austin. It reducing the cognitive load for students, so they don't have to worry about all these items that folks are adding to the word cloud right now. They don't have to worry about logging into these, several different systems. They can come into Leo and find those those items connected in a one-stop shop.
Yeah, and we're seeing those results come in. This is the word cloud feature in Poll Everywhere. So the terms that are entered most often, looks like Zoom and Panopto are really used a lot. I see Turning Point in there. So clicker tools, Soft Chalk was one I remember someone mentioning yesterday in our afternoon session was one that, or it might have been in our Leo Lounge. If, for all of you client partners out there, be sure to join the Leo Lounge. Tomorrow, I think we'll have that open again as well. Soft Chalk is one of those really cool tools. I know I've seen that used to create kind of learning modules that you can drop right into your learning management system. I see lots of lecture capture stuff, Top Hat, Padlet. Padlet is a really great one. Padlet's one of those that you can embed pretty easily as well. Kind of like I showed you with Quizlet. Padlet is a really fun one to embed there. Yeah, some excellent stuff there. Thank you all for sharing and contributing to our discussion today. I'm actually going to throw the Q&A back up so that we can see what questions you guys have today. What questions have come up. I am going to advance the slide just a little bit here, if I can get that to go. All right, so I just wanted to bring back up the learning objectives for today. And so these were the things that we really wanted to talk about, really focusing on how you can, how Leo helps support some of these things. Again, we're gonna get into the kind of the nuts and bolts of some of these things this afternoon, talking about especially the rich content editor and embedding content and a little bit of information on LTI this afternoon. But for now, just looking through the Q&A, Dan, is there anything you see that we really need to talk about?
Yeah, I'll play host here and kick us both the questions here. First and foremost, we're going to use the power of the upvote, and the one that had the most upvotes is, can you give some specific examples of how students can reflect after a session? How much time, what does it look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so one thing I really like, Poll Everywhere is actually a pretty cool tool for this one. Just dropping in a quick question where students can enter, and you can do those in different ways. They have different tools for like anonymous surveys. So students don't necessarily see each other's answers, but it's just using some of those embedded tools. And I would recommend doing that kind of like at the end of a class session. And so like don't spend, a ton of time on it. Tell students, take a few minutes. I know when I was in the classroom, I've taught, for those of you that aren't familiar with my background, I've taught from the middle school grades all the way up to university students. And one of the things that I love, and I call it, I call it this with my students at all levels, is an exit ticket. Dan, I see you nodding your head there. Exit tickets are really great. They're a way for students to reflect on what happened during that class session. And so, did they get it? Did they not get it? What questions do they still have? I've heard the 3, 2, 1 concept where students write down 3 things they learned, 2 things that they struggled with, or 1 question they still have, things like that. And so just giving them, they can send you a message in Leo. There's so many different ways they can do that. You could even get old fashioned and just have them write that on a sheet of paper and drop it in a basket as they walk out the door. Things like that are super helpful, but it's a great way for them to reflect, but also for you to get feedback on what's, where the students are and where they need to go next. So yeah, in terms of how much time, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on things like that. And as far as what it looks like, a lot of different ways. Dan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that or not.
The only other thing, I love the exit slip. I've used that plenty. I've also done a little bit of like having students provide a brief synopsis in their own words, or even trying to identify the important points and actually trying to restrict how much verbiage they use to really be very succinct in what the high points are, what they took away from it, and where they struggled. So kind of really an exit slip type of thing, but just providing a little bit more structure to it in that way. Since we're running out of time, I'm going to go to a couple of the easier questions, because a couple of these questions, actually, I know Austin will, and the rest of our team will actually address in some of the lab sessions, and that we can also follow up after the fact. Austin, this one's for you. Does Microsoft Forms work in Leo?
With Microsoft Forms specifically, yeah, I believe they have an embed option. So there shouldn't be any problem embedding those in Leo. It could be, depending on how your administration has the Microsoft instance set up in terms of who has access. Can you share it outside of your institution, or can you only share within your institution? Depending on those settings and the settings you choose for when you're sharing the form, you might have to, students might need to be logged in to Microsoft already. But in terms of that, embedding forms in Leo shouldn't be a problem at all.
And along with that, another comment or question: I'd like to embed content, other tools in Leo, but I'm making it meant to say I'm not very tech savvy. I'm not very tech savvy. How tough is it for a tech novice to embed content in a learning event? I'm going to take this in a very rudimentary way, because I'm not as tech savvy as our friend Austin here. I've done plenty of embedding with, and it's truly a copy and paste. I know the 23 embeddable items, that article that Austin posted actually gives you a step-by-step little easy guide on how to copy and paste. And Austin, you can probably say like anything beyond that anyone should know. Yeah,
it is. Sure, it can be intimidating when you click, when you go to one of these third-party tools like Pull Everywhere or Quizlet, like I mentioned earlier, Padlet, and you click, you look for the embed icon. For the sake of basically it's one of the icons you're going to see is going to be like two brackets. It's that if you click on that article, you'll see those symbols. And that's usually what the icon people have for embedding content. And what I would, when you click on that and you see this code, HTML code, and that can definitely be intimidating. But like Dan said, it's for the most part, it's pretty much just copy and paste. There are a few tricks that you can do. You don't have to do those tricks. You can just take the code, copy, paste, drop it right in. But there are some tricks that you can, kind of change the way it displays, or, how big it is, or things like that. I'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon if you join us for the Leo Lab session. But I really want to encourage you, if you're intimidated by it at all, don't, just give it a try. Just hit the copy button, go to Leo, click on the little embed icon, and then you just paste it in. And then from there, let Leo do the rest. Yeah.
That's well said. With that, we are right up against time. We do have some other comments in there. If they aren't something that we will be addressed in our lab sessions, we can also take it over to the discussion. So if you look on the left side of the event page, there is the discussion tabs. Austin has posted some questions in there already that we would love for everyone to share some answers in there. And then we can also take these, Austin, and provide some answers or continue a conversation on some of the items that we unfortunately ran out of time.
Yeah, Dan, I was just going to say, feel free to I think you hit the create topic button, and you guys can drop any other questions in there. Start a new conversation. Happy to do that. We'll get into that discussion board as well after our session today. And like Dan said, we're right at time. So I think that is all for today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been fun. Thank you for the interaction and joining with us in Pull Everywhere. And if you have any more questions, please let us know. I think I have one more slide. If you want to get in touch with us, you can actually find our contact information right in the event in Leo. So just go back to the event, click on, don't do it yet, but click on details, And then if you see, we're both listed as the instructor, so you can click on either one of our names, shoot us an email, and yeah, and the recording will be available as soon as it's ready. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.